Hi, my name is George Rivari from Knowledge Tree Consulting. I've had the luxury of a landscaping business for 38 years, and I've learned a lot of lessons on the way. One of the most important questions that I get typically asked is, how do I grow my business? And actually, how do I make the transitions from one role to another? And when do I bring the people in? And who do I bring in? So I've got a chart behind me that I've sort of mapped out the steps that I think typically are the most effective way to get yourself out of the business so you can work on the business. Because each one of those steps requires you to actually work in the business in a specific role, oftentimes doing many of the roles at the same time. As your business inevitably grows, if you do a good job, you're going to have to shed hats because you just can't keep up with the workload. So on the board here, I've got this really simple diagram that explains the sequence of how you're going to get out of your business and actually shed those hats. So typically most of us are not great at finance. Most landscapers or business people in general are operations minded, but that's not the first hat you're going to shed. The first hat that you're going to shed is actually doing the work in the field. So that's number one. The second one, generally that I recommend, is to get an expert to handle the money for you. Now, either that's going to be your own bookkeeper. Typically, it could be your spouse. That's often the case. Somebody's got to handle the books. If it's your spouse, unfortunately, you're probably not paying them enough. So I would suggest that you increase your overhead expense and make sure he or she, your partner, gets paid sufficiently for that role. Otherwise, they're subsidizing the business. So the money part is something you want to get an expert to do, something that you probably are not good at, don't have the time to do. There's all kinds of deadlines like payroll and taxes and state tax submissions, things like that, which are really interrupting you from making a better business. So the next piece of the equation is the operations, right? So that's getting the people, the materials, the equipment to site on time and on budget to get the work done. And that's a very disruptive role. Somebody doesn't show up, a machine breaks down, a delivery doesn't happen, boom, everything changes. You have to react instantly. So this role generally is the next hat that I would shed because it's the most disruptive. You can't focus when you're constantly being bombarded. So in line with that is the HR hat. Now HR, if you do it well and you have low turnover, you're going to have great recruiting, you're going to have great onboarding, right? You're going to have great retention, and ideally you're going to have great training. Or you're so good at hiring talent that you really don't have to train them much. That's great too, but HR is the next hat that I would shed. Oftentimes in a smaller business, you can have the operations and the HR roles shared. And as you grow, then you shed that HR hat and you create a separate position for that role. This is really important because this is what's going to get you your talent and keep your talent. And without talent, you're going to have a very tough time in business. So the sales is something that almost everybody does in business. Like nobody starts a business and doesn't sell. So the truth of the matter is, although it's a common skill set, it's probably the last one you're going to give up. The reason is that through this process, you're connected to all those people. It's probably the hardest one emotionally to let go of, the sales, the relationships with the clients, but it's also really, really important. We can get into how we actually shed the sales hat role in another discussion, but that's the next move. But one thing you never do is get rid of networking. So networking is a type of selling. It's a higher level selling. That's the meetings at your golf club. That's the golf tournaments that you go to. That's the business associations that you're involved in. That should never end regardless, whether you're at the CEO level, the general manager level, or the chairman level once you're a much larger business. But these are the steps generally that you take to get out of your business. The constraint, obviously, for growth is people and money. So you have to find the talent. Oftentimes, you can have somebody who's in operations and then can take on that HR role because they're already familiar with your business. So it makes total sense. Maybe you hire an assistant for the operations HR component. So it doesn't have to be a full step. Sometimes it can be a half step as the budget allows. Having said that, I can tell you that when you have part-time people, you get part-time results. And the reason is that you're essentially waiting for those people to be available to do what you need done. So it becomes reactive instead of proactive behavior on those employees' parts. Not their fault, and you're trying to save money, but I really generally like to have full-time people Otherwise, it's really, really hard to grow your business. And that's sort of a tactical move. It's not a strategic move. Oftentimes, you're going to have to give up a little bit of profit as you're making your transition in these growth moves. And oftentimes, if you get a really good operations manager, you can save a ton of money in terms of eliminating inefficiency in your business, especially if you train the principles of Kaizen, which is continual improvement. So anyway, that's the journey for shedding hats in a business. Don't start hiring salespeople right away. It's probably the biggest mistake you'll make.